Florida and the Bahamas are practically neighbors, just 50 miles apart. That's closer than some people's daily commute. If we can build bridges stretching for miles and tunnels cutting through entire mountains, why isn't there a tunnel between Florida and the Bahamas? A high-speed underwater highway could turn a trip to paradise into a quick drive. No airports, no waiting, just a smooth, scenic ride under the ocean. It seems like a no-brainer, right? And yet, it doesn't exist. But why? Is it too expensive, too complicated? Or is there something they don't want us to know? Let's get into it. We have underwater tunnels all over the world. The Channel Tunnel between England and France, 31 miles long, 250 feet deep. Japan's Seikan Tunnel, 33.5 miles long, 787 feet deep. Norway's Rogfast Tunnel, under construction, 16.7 miles long, 1,000 feet deep. Meanwhile, Florida to the Bahamas? Just 50 miles. That's shorter than a drive from Miami to West Palm Beach. So why not just dig a tunnel and call it a day? Well, as it turns out, that's not so simple. And the first issue? The ocean is way deeper than you think. The Florida Straits, the body of water separating Florida and the Bahamas, is much deeper than most people realize. While most underwater tunnels go through relatively shallow seas, the Florida Straits plunge to more than 6,000 feet deep in some areas. That's not just deep, it's deeper than the Grand Canyon. For comparison, the Seikan Tunnel in Japan, one of the deepest in the world, is only 787 feet below sea level. The Channel Tunnel between England and France sits just 250 feet below the sea. Even Norway's Rogfast Tunnel, set to be the deepest road tunnel, will only reach 1,000 feet below sea level. Now, imagine trying to dig a tunnel 6 times deeper than the world's deepest tunnel. It's completely unrealistic with today's engineering. At 6,000 feet deep, the pressure is an unimaginable 2,600 pounds per square inch, enough to crush submarines, collapse steel structures, and destroy most materials we build with. And we all know what happened the last time some billionaires thought it was a good idea to go exploring the deep ocean in a private sub. Too soon? Let's just say, if a tunnel were built at that depth, it wouldn't just have traffic jams, it would be a giant metal tube, constantly being squeezed by the weight of an entire ocean. Not ideal. Even if engineers somehow figured out a way to build a tunnel at these depths, there's another major problem. The ocean floor here is a complete mess. Unlike solid bedrock, which provides a stable foundation for tunnels, the seabed in the Florida Straits is made of soft limestone, shifting sands, and fragile coral formations. This stuff crumbles, shifts, and erodes over time, meaning any tunnel built here would constantly risk collapse or damage. And let's not forget underwater landslides. Yes, that's a thing. We usually think of landslides as something that happens on mountains or cliffs, but underwater landslides are just as real and just as dangerous. They happen when unstable sediments on the ocean floor suddenly shift and collapse. This can be triggered by earthquakes, strong ocean currents, or even the natural settling of loose sand and mud. When an underwater landslide occurs, it sends huge amounts of sediment rushing down the slope, sometimes for miles. And guess what? The Florida Straits are prone to them. Now imagine spending billions of dollars building a tunnel, only for a massive landslide to bury part of it under thousands of tons of mud and debris. Not exactly ideal for your morning commute. Even if, by some miracle, a tunnel was successfully built at this depth, cars and trucks driving through it would need fresh air. Underwater tunnels need powerful ventilation systems to constantly pump in oxygen and remove carbon dioxide, toxic fumes, and exhaust gases. Most underwater tunnels, like the Channel Tunnel, use ventilation shafts that rise to the surface at regular intervals. These shafts act like chimneys, allowing fresh air to circulate. But there's one big problem. Where would you put these ventilation shafts in the Florida Straits? There's no solid ground, just miles of open ocean. The only option would be massive floating ventilation towers, which would not only be insanely expensive, but also vulnerable to hurricanes and rogue waves. If these floating shafts failed, the air in the tunnel would turn toxic within minutes. Imagine driving along and suddenly you realize there's no oxygen left. Not exactly a relaxing road trip. And let's not forget the creatures living at 6,000 feet deep. because they're terrifying. Most people think of the ocean as a friendly place with colorful fish and dolphins, but at 6,000 feet, it's a different world. There's no sunlight, the water is near freezing, and the creatures that survive down there look like something out of a horror movie. The giant squid. This massive creature can grow over 40 feet long and has tentacles covered in sharp hooks. The fang-toothed fish. A tiny fish with the largest teeth-to-body ratio in the animal kingdom. Even though it's small, it looks like it wants to eat your soul. The barrel-eye fish. A fish with a completely transparent head, so it can literally look through its own skull. The frilled shark. Basically a living fossil that looks like a cross between a snake and a shark. Imagine driving through a tunnel and a crack appears. Not only are you trapped, but now some prehistoric nightmare fish is looking at you like you're its next meal. Even if we ignore these engineering nightmares, there's still the elephant in the room. Who's paying for it? Because, spoiler alert, this tunnel isn't coming cheap. For reference, here's what some of the most expensive underwater tunnels in the world cost. The Channel Tunnel, UK, France, $15 billion in the 1990s. The Seikan Tunnel, Japan, $7 billion. The Rogfast Tunnel, Norway, under construction, $25 billion projected. A Florida Bahamas tunnel? Experts estimate it would cost at least $100 billion. And that's being optimistic. And knowing how large-scale government projects work, by the time it's finished, it'll probably cost twice as much and still not work properly. But who's picking up the bill then? Let's start with the Bahamas. Their entire GDP is only $13 billion, meaning even if they stopped paying for everything else, including roads, schools, healthcare, and I don't know, electricity, they still wouldn't have enough to cover even a fraction of the cost. So what about the US? Well, the US barely maintains its existing roads and bridges. Every few months, a new report comes out warning that America's infrastructure is falling apart. Yet the government still struggles to fund basic projects. You think they were going to drop $100 billion on a tunnel to a vacation destination? Highly unlikely. Maybe some billionaire could fund it? Elon Musk is too busy trying to put tunnels under cities where they already have roads and making cars that drive into walls. And Trump? He did say he was a big fan of big, beautiful infrastructure. But something tells me a Florida to the Bahamas tunnel would be the world's most over-budget project in history. I can already hear the press conference.
We're building the greatest tunnel, the best tunnel. People are saying, maybe the best tunnel ever built. It's going to be so deep, so strong, the ocean will be too scared to crush it. And the Bahamas? They're going to pay for it. Believe me.
Right, let's imagine somehow the tunnel does get built. Now you have to pay to drive through it. A tunnel this expensive would need outrageous tolls to ever break even. A one-way trip could cost hundreds, if not thousands of dollars per vehicle. Why would anyone do that when they can take a $100 flight and be there in 45 minutes? Well, even if you do it, you want a tunnel that keeps standing. That's easy, right? Well, not if Mother Nature has anything to say about it. Let's start with hurricanes. Because in case you didn't know, the Florida-Bahamas region is basically a yearly racetrack for some of the strongest storms on Earth. Every single year, massive hurricanes sweep through this area, bringing 150-plus mile-per-hour winds, 40-foot storm surges, and enough rain to make NOAA start looking for lumber. Now, a tunnel might be underwater, but here's the problem. It wouldn't just be one long road. It would need ventilation shafts, escape exits, and maintenance access points. And where would those go? Above water, right in the middle of Hurricane Central. That means every single hurricane season, these critical structures would be under constant threat of getting ripped apart by the wind and waves. And if those flood, congratulations, you now have a massive multi-billion-dollar water slide straight into the abyss. And before you ask, well, can't we make it waterproof? Sure. And you can also try keeping your car windows down in a rainstorm and not getting wet. But hurricanes aren't even the worst problem. Because if there's one thing worse than a flood, it's an earthquake. Most people don't realize this, but the Caribbean is a seismic hotspot. The region sits near multiple tectonic plate boundaries, meaning earthquakes are not a rare event. In 2020, a 7.7 magnitude earthquake hit just south of Cuba, shaking the entire region, including Florida and the Bahamas. Now, let's imagine you're driving miles under the ocean, when suddenly the ground shifts beneath you. Best case scenario? The tunnel shakes, you panic, but nothing collapses immediately. Worst case? The tunnel cracks open, and you have about 10 seconds to realize that your car is now a submarine, without the safety features. Even if engineers somehow designed the tunnel to be earthquake-resistant, the seabed it's built on is not. The ocean floor is made of soft limestone and shifting sands, which means even a minor quake could cause structural failure, cracks, or total collapse. Think of it this way. Even bridges on solid ground collapse during earthquakes. Now imagine a bridge, except it's 6,000 feet under the ocean, surrounded by shifting rock with millions of tons of water waiting to rush in. It's not a question of if something would go wrong. It's when. And just in case hurricanes and earthquakes weren't bad enough, let's throw in another fun disaster. Tsunamis. Tsunamis are giant waves caused by undersea earthquakes. And if one hits this tunnel, let's just say that driving through it would suddenly feel a lot like being inside a washing machine. So let's recap. Hurricanes would flood the tunnel's ventilation shafts and entrances. Earthquakes would crack the tunnel or shift the seabed under it. Tsunamis could cause sudden, catastrophic failure. And while engineers could try to design ways to minimize these risks at the end of the day, nature doesn't care how much money you spend. It doesn't matter if we build the most advanced tunnel in history. If the ocean decides it doesn't want it there, it's game over. So, is there any reason at all to build this tunnel? Actually, after tearing this idea apart for the last minutes, it's only fair to acknowledge one good reason why this tunnel would be helpful. Trade. Right now, shipping between Florida and the Bahamas relies on cargo ships and ferries. A tunnel would revolutionize transportation between the two, allowing for faster delivery of goods, reducing shipping costs, and boosting economic ties. It would also mean better access to supplies for the Bahamas, which relies heavily on imports for food, medicine, and construction materials. Instead of waiting for a boat, supplies could be trucked in directly from Florida. And let's not forget the tourism factor. The Bahamas is one of the biggest vacation hotspots in the world. If tourists could drive there in under an hour, it would make weekend getaways easier than ever. No waiting for flights, no dealing with airports. Just jump in your car and go. And if that sounds familiar, it's because that's exactly why people have been talking about a Florida-Bahamas tunnel for years. So, is there a good reason for this tunnel? Sure. Would it ever actually happen? Not a chance. Because while a Florida-Bahamas tunnel sounds like an incredible idea on paper, the reality is, it would be insanely expensive. The ocean doesn't want it to exist. Hurricanes and earthquakes would try to destroy it. And even if it got built, almost no one would pay to use it. So while it's fun to imagine a future where you can drive to the Bahamas for a weekend getaway, the truth is, this tunnel isn't happening. Not today, not tomorrow, probably not ever. And that's why there is no tunnel between Florida and the Bahamas.